It feels like there's this unspoken rule at dinner parties lately.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you can talk about politics, you can talk about the weather, even your weird medical stuff. But if you bring up real estate prices,
Oh, someone is going to slip a table.
right, it is the ultimate trigger subject right now.
Everyone feels it.
Deeply.
They really do. And, we all obsess over the Zestimate, right? We obsess over what the neighbor sold their place for.
Do you see the listing price on the two-bedroom?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. While everyone's staring at the price tag, I feel like we've been completely ignoring the engine room. There's this quiet force that's actually been controlling the entire housing market from the shadows. And honestly, until I read the source material, I didn't realize just how tight its grip was.
You're talking about the lock-in effect? I am. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a report titled The Mortgage Lock-in Effect and Shifting Housing Inventory. And the mission today is to look past sticker prices and really understand the mechanics of why the housing market has been, well, frozen solid for 3 years. And, more importantly, why this report says the ice is finally cracking.
And it's not just a little hairline fracture. The data suggests a structural break in the dam.
It's a massive shift. We're going to talk about a specific statistic, a 300% jump in a key metric that is effectively rewriting the rules for buyers and sellers. But before the numbers, we have to talk about the psychology.
Right.
Because this isn't just about banking regulations. It's about that I want to move, but I physically can't dilemma.
Right. It's the story of the last few years. You have millions of people sitting in homes they've outgrown or homes they want to downsize from, but they're just paralyzed.
Paralyzed.
Not by the price of the new house, but by the debt structure of their old one.
Okay, so let's peel this back. To understand where we're going, this whole thawing of the market, we have to understand the freeze. So take us back. We all remember 2020, 2021.
The era of free money.
It felt like it. I mean, I remember friends locking in 2.75% and feeling like they just won the lottery.
And financially, they kind of did. To stimulate the economy during the pandemic, the Fed's actions pushed mortgage rates to historic lows. We saw 30-year fixed rates in the 2% range.
Wild.
But that lottery ticket came with a catch. It created what we call the golden handcuffs.
Explain that concept. How does a great rate become a handcuff?
Okay, so, see, most people buy a home based on the monthly payment, not the total price.
Sure.
And when rates were at 3%, your buying power was incredibly high. You could afford a lot of house for, say, $2,000 a month. But then inflation hits, the Fed pivots, and rates skyrocket to 6, 7, even 8%.
Right. So fast forward, you're sitting in your house with that 3% mortgage. Maybe you just had another kid, you need another bedroom. You look at the house down the street. It costs about what your house is worth. But, and this is the lock-in, to buy it, you have to trade your 3% mortgage for a 7% one.
And the math on that isn't just a little annoying. It's catastrophic for a household budget.
Catastrophic.
It's a wealth destroyer. On a typical median-priced home, going from a 3% to a 7% rate, it doesn't just increase your payment by a few $100.
Right.
It can increase the monthly interest cost by 50% or more.
You're paying double.
You're effectively paying double for the privilege of borrowing the same amount of money.
And that's the financial penalty the source talks about.
That is the penalty. And for the last 3 years, that penalty has been so high that it simply stopped the market from functioning. It didn't matter if you hated your house or got a job offer 3 towns over.
The cost of leaving was just too high.
The cost of giving up that cheap debt was higher than the benefit of moving.
It's like having a golden ticket, but the only way to leave the room is to burn the ticket on the way out.
That's a perfect analogy. And because nobody wanted to burn their ticket, nobody listed their homes.
So inventory just...
It plummeted. We had this weird standoff where there were no buyers because rates were high, but also no sellers because... Well, because rates were high.
So that's been the status quo, the frozen market, the golden handcuffs. But this deep dive isn't just a history lesson. The reason we're talking about this is that the source material points to a specific moment where this whole dynamic shifts.
The data is showing a massive rotation, a really big one.
Okay, let's get into this 300% number. When I read this in the report, I had to double-check the chart because it just seemed too significant to be real. It centers on homeowners with a mortgage rate above 5%.
Right. So why 5%? Well, think of 5% as the psychological bridge.
Okay.
If market rates are, say, 6.5 or 7%, and your current rate is 2.5%, that gap is a chasm. You can't cross it.
Too painful.
Way too painful. But if your current rate is 5.5%...
Then moving to 6.5% is annoying, sure, but it's not life-altering.
Exactly. The financial penalty shrinks significantly. You're not doubling your interest payments. So the report tracks how many Americans are sitting above that 5% threshold.
And what's the trend line look like?
Well, in 2022, right after rates started to hike, fewer than 1 in 10 homeowners had a rate above 5%. The vast majority, over 90%, were locked in with those golden tickets.
Which totally explains why 2023 was such a ghost town for listings. Everyone was entrenched.
Correct. But now, look at the data for today. That number has jumped from less than 10% to more than 1 in 3 homeowners.
That is the 300% increase.
Yes, over a third of all mortgaged homes in the U.S. now have a rate that makes moving financially viable again.
Wait, hang on, let's pause there. How did that happen so fast? I mean, if nobody was selling, how did so many people end up with higher rates?
It's the churn of life, really. The lock-in effect is strong, but it's not invincible. In real estate, we often talk about the 5 Ds.
The 5 Ds.
Vipers, diamonds, divorce, debt, and death.
Wow, okay. That covers pretty much everything.
Life doesn't stop for interest rates. People eventually have to move, they get divorced, have to sell, they get married, buy a first home at these new high rates. Some people refinance to pull cash out for an emergency, resetting their rate.
So we've been diluting the pool.
Slowly, month by month, we've been diluting the pool of 3%ers. We're replacing them with 6 and 7%ers.
So the lock-in isn't a permanent wall, it's more like a melting glacier.
That is a great way to put it. And we've reached a tipping point. With 1/3 of the market now unlocked, the source suggests we are about to see a supply chain reaction.
Let's talk about that reaction, because if the barrier to selling is dropping, then, I mean, that has to mean inventory is going to rise.
It has to. When you remove that friction, mobility increases. People who've been waiting since 2022 are looking at the math and realizing, hey, the gap between my rate and the market rate isn't that bad anymore.
So does this mean we're going to see a flood of houses hitting the market? And if so, does that mean prices crash? Because that's the other side of the coin, right?
Right.
Scarcity was the only thing propping up prices.
The source is very nuanced here, and it's really important not to misinterpret this. It explicitly warns against expecting a crash.
Okay.
Instead, it uses the term balance.
Balance feels like a bit of a euphemism. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, think about the last few years. Scarcity defined everything. You list a house, you get 10 offers, you sell for 50 grand over asking in 24 hours.
A market driven by desperation.
Totally. As inventory rises, as that dam breaks, buyers suddenly have choices.
So instead of one house for sale in the neighborhood, suddenly there are 4.
Right. And when there are 4, the buyers don't have to panic. They can take their time. This leads to days on market creeping up. Houses sit for 30, 45, 60 days.
And that kills the automatic appreciation, doesn't it?
It kills it dead. The source highlights this as a major adjustment for sellers. We all got used to this idea that you buy a house and it just goes up 20% in value.
Just for existing.
Yeah, that was an anomaly, a supply shortage artifact.
Yeah.
The new normal is, flat or maybe low single-digit appreciation.
So if I'm a seller, I can't just rely on being the only game in town anymore.
No. And this brings us to the strategy shift the report really emphasizes. The playbook from 2021 or even early 2023 is totally obsolete.
I want to dig into this because I have a neighbor who just listed. They put a coming soon sign up, did the 0 staging, priced it way high. It's been sitting there for 3 weeks, and they seem confused.
That is a classic old way mistake. In a scarcity market, you can be sloppy, you can price aggressively, skip repairs, have bad photos.
And someone will still buy it.
Someone will buy it because they have no other choice.
Then the new reality.
The new reality is a beauty contest. If there are 5 other houses for sale, yours has to be the most compelling. The source lists specific factors sellers now have to analyze things they could ignore before.
Like what?
Local inventory levels. For one, you need to know exactly what your competition is offering. Seasonal buyer demand matters again. You can't just list in December and expect a bidding war. And quality. Marketing quality is paramount now.
It sounds like you actually have to work for the sale now.
You do. And there's a timing risk the report mentions that I found really interesting. It talks about the concept of acting earlier versus later.
Meaning beat the rush.
Exactly. If we know the lock-in is breaking, if we know that 300% statistic means more sellers are coming, then waiting is actually risky.
Right.
If you wait 6 months to sell, you might be competing with double the inventory on your street.
That is a huge psychological shift. For years, the advice was hold, prices will go up. Now it's if you're going to sell, do it before everyone else does.
And pricing accuracy is the other part of that. you can't test the market with a high price anymore. If you price too high in a balanced market, the listing just goes stale. Buyers see it sitting for 60 days, and they assume something is wrong with it. They smell blood in the water.
Okay, let's flip the lens. We've been talking about sellers losing their easy ride, but for the listener who's been trying to buy a house and getting absolutely crushed for 3 years, this all sounds like a miracle.
It is the most significant shift for buyers since before the pandemic. The key word the source uses is leverage.
Leverage. I feel like buyers have been begging for scraps. What does leverage actually look like in this new market?
It starts with options. Just having more than one house to look at changes your psychology. You don't feel that desperation, but, specifically, the source points to the return of contingencies.
Oh, the protections.
Yes, inspections, financing contingencies, appraisal gaps. For a while there, buyers were waiving inspections just to get their offer read.
That is so dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous.
I have friends who did that. Waived the inspection, moved in, and found out the sewer line was collapsed. A $15,000 repair day one.
And that was the cost of the old market. In this new market, buyers can demand inspections. They can ask for repairs. If the roof is old, you can ask the seller to replace it or give you a credit.
And speaking of credits, is there actual money on the table?
There is. Seller concessions are back. The source notes that because sellers are competing for a smaller pool of buyers who can afford these rates, they're getting creative. We're seeing rate buy-downs.
Okay, explain that for someone who might not know the term.
So instead of dropping the price of a house by, say, $10,000, the seller gives the buyer $10,000 at closing to buy points on their mortgage.
Okay.
This lowers the buyer's interest rate for the first 2 years or even permanently. It makes the monthly payment much more affordable.
That's huge. That directly addresses the affordability problem.
It does. It frames this whole trend as a move toward normalized conditions. It isn't necessarily a buyer's market where you can lowball everyone by 20%, but it is certainly no longer the extreme seller's market it was.
It feels like the market is sobering up after a very, very wild party.
That's a good way to put it. The hangover is fading and reality is setting in.
So we've covered the lock-in breaking, the rise in inventory, and the shift in power. But if I'm a homeowner listening to this and I'm trying to figure out what to do, how do I actually make a decision? The source mentions a new SMART question.
Yes, this is critical.
Yeah.
For years, the only question homeowners asked was, what is my home worth?
Right. You check the app, you see the equity, you feel rich.
But that's a static number. It's a vanity metric. It doesn't tell you anything about your future. The expert analysis in our source argues that the better question is, what does selling now versus later look like financially?
That sounds more complex. Break down the variables for us.
It requires a personalized market snapshot. You can't just look at the sales price. You have to look at the cost of waiting versus the cost of moving.
Okay, walk me through that.
First, you calculate your estimated net proceeds, which you'd walk away with after all the fees. Then, you run the payment scenarios for the new home at current rates. That's kind of the bad news part of the calculation.
Because the rate is higher.
Right. But then you have to factor in the risk. What happens to your net proceeds if inventory keeps rising and prices soften? If prices dip just 5% because of a flood of inventory, that might wipe out $30,000 of your equity.
Oh, I see.
Is that loss bigger than the extra interest you'd pay on the new loan?
So you're comparing the interest rate hit against the potential equity loss from waiting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And opportunity cost. What if buyer demand weakens further? Or what if rates dip slightly and suddenly everyone lists at once and you're just lost in the noise?
So it isn't just I can sell for $500,000. It is if I sell for $500,000 now, my payment is X. If I wait and inventory spikes, maybe I only sell for $480 later.
Precisely. It turns the decision from a gamble into a calculation. It forces you to look at the whole picture: equity, debt, and market timing.
Which is what we all want, really. Less gambling, more planning.
You can't navigate this market on vibes anymore. You need the spreadsheet.
Okay, let's bring this all together. This has been a fascinating look under the hood. We started with this idea of a hidden force controlling the market, those interest rates acting as a dam.
A lock-in effect.
And we found out that the lock is breaking. We went from a market frozen by 3% rates to a market that is thawing out and fast because 1 in 3 homeowners are now above that 5% threshold.
A massive structural change in just 2 years.
It really is. It changes the incentives for a third of the country.
And for you, the listener, whether you are looking to buy or sell, the takeaway is that the strategy has to change. You cannot use the playbook from 2021.
Speed is out, analysis is in.
Correct. The market is becoming more nuanced. It requires more thought, more patience, and better data.
Before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. We talked about the dam breaking earlier.
Yes, and this is the provocative thought I want everyone to consider. For a long time, we viewed the lock-in effect as the thing saving home prices. It kept supply artificially low, which propped up values even when rates rose. It was a safety net for sellers.
But if the net is gone?
Exactly. If that 300% increase in higher rate homeowners means the water is starting to flow, then that safety net is dissolving. The biggest risk for a seller today isn't necessarily selling too low.
It's waiting too long.
It might be waiting too long, waiting for a better market that might not come.
Or waiting for a moment when you're unique, only to find yourself listing at the exact same time as everyone else on your block.
If you sit around waiting for the perfect moment, you might find yourself getting lost in the flood of new listings that is coming down the river.
That is a sobering thought. The perfect time might have been yesterday, but the next best time is to at least run the numbers today.
Don't guess. Calculate.
I love that. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope this helps you navigate the shifting sands of the housing market. As always, thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Catch you on the next one.